She packed everything she owned into a rental car and drove it back to Atlanta alone. No team, no contract, no explanation that made any public sense. Diamond DeShields had just been cut by a third WNBA organization in less than 12 months, and the league never once said her name in connection with why. No press conference, no formal statement, no document with her name on it. Just 3 quiet waiver notices from 3 different front offices, and a career that went from WNBA All-Star to completely off every roster in the time it takes most players to play a single full season. You've been watching this story unfold in real time. A lot of you have been connecting the dots for months. So here is the full picture, because what happened to DeShields, Chennedy Carter, and Sheryl Swoopes inside the same 12-month window tells you something about this league that no official announcement was ever going to say out loud. The WNBA doesn't need to ban anyone. The market does it for them. And once you understand the economics behind that statement, every quiet decision that happened this season snaps into focus. Let's go back to August 30th, 2024. Indiana Fever versus the Chicago Sky at Wintrust Arena. The Fever were already controlling the game. This would end up a 100-81 blowout. Caitlin Clark was moving at full speed across the lane, receiving a pass from Aaliyah Boston on a fast break. DeShields tracked her, not the ball. Her eyes were on Clark's body, not the basketball, and when she made contact, it was shoulder first, from behind, sending Clark into the floor hard. The refs whistled a common foul. No review, no flagrant, just a basic call that didn't match what everyone in that arena could see with their own eyes. The WNBA reviewed the footage and upgraded it to a flagrant 1. The replay confirmed what every person watching in real time already knew. This wasn't an aggressive defensive rotation. It wasn't a scramble for position. Players bump in the WNBA all game long. That's basketball. But there is a specific kind of contact where you lower your shoulder, fix your eyes on a player rather than a play, and make an impact that has nothing to do with what's happening in front of you. DeShields crossed that line with Clark down on the floor as evidence. The fake hand extended afterward fooled nobody in the building. Within hours, the clip had spread to every corner of sports media. Fans called it targeted. Analysts broke the positioning down frame by frame. Commentators pointed out the eerie similarity to something that had happened earlier that same season, a separate play involving a separate Chicago Sky player, the same Indiana Fever star, and the same exact type of contact that had nothing to do with the basketball game being played. But here is the detail that got glossed over in the initial firestorm. This wasn't an isolated moment of poor judgment. DeShields had built a pattern of physicality with Clark every time these two teams shared the floor in 2024. Extra contact off the ball, hard closeouts that went well past the basketball play, body checks during cuts. The hit on August 30th wasn't something that came out of nowhere. It was the loudest version of something that had been building all season long. And that distinction matters enormously because it tells you exactly how the front offices that evaluated her afterward were reading the situation. When 3 separate organizations pass on a player, they're not making emotional decisions, they're reading a pattern, and DeShields had given them plenty of pattern to read. The Chicago Sky moved first. DeShields' minutes dropped almost immediately. Her rotation spots disappeared. Then came the waiver notice, wrapped in the standard language about roster direction and team strategy that every front office uses when they want to say something without actually saying it. Clark's name was never mentioned. It didn't need to be. DeShields knew exactly what the subtext was. She went public on social media, talking about packing her belongings into that rental car, the emotional weight of suddenly being without a team, the difficulty of figuring out how to get herself back to Atlanta. The New York Liberty picked her up. On paper, that made sense. Teams need wing depth, especially heading into a playoff push. DeShields had an all-star appearance on her resume and years of professional experience, a legitimate skill set that should have translated. But the liberty kept her for a handful of games, gave her nothing beyond garbage time minutes, and then issued their own statement about roster construction and team chemistry that said absolutely nothing while saying everything. A second rejection. The Connecticut Sun became her third stop. She made it through the entire preseason, ran every drill, participated in every scrimmage, showed up every single day. Then the Sun cut her before opening day. She's been without a WNBA team ever since. 3 organizations, 3 exits. Not one of them publicly acknowledged the obvious thread running through all 3 decisions.
Here's what that pattern tells you. Front office executives around the league were not making independent decisions in isolation. Sources close to multiple organizations reported that sponsors were asking uncomfortable questions. Fans were openly vocal about not wanting DeShields on their rosters. And while the league office wasn't issuing statements, the message was getting through to every decision-maker watching. Nobody was willing to absorb the reputational cost of being the team that signed her. And in a league this size, with this few roster spots, that kind of invisible blacklist doesn't need to be written down anywhere. Players with DeShields' resume, WNBA champion in 2021, All-Star appearance, years of professional production, do not cycle through 3 teams in a single season unless the problem has nothing to do with basketball ability. She had the talent, she had the track record. What she didn't have anymore was the league's unspoken approval. And in a 13-team market, that approval is everything. DeShields wasn't the first player to discover this. She was just the most recent name added to a list that had started growing months earlier, starting with a play on June 1, 2024, that became one of the most discussed moments in WNBA history in about 48 hours. Chennedy Carter had just scored a basket to pull the Sky within 4 points late in the third quarter. The Fever were inbounding the ball. Caitlin Clark was standing at half-court, not looking at anyone, not involved in any play. Carter walked up to her and delivered a hard hip check, shoulder into Clark's body, sending her sprawling across the hardwood. Clark wasn't near the ball. She wasn't making any move. Carter wasn't making any basketball play at all. The refs called a common foul. The WNBA reviewed the footage the following day and upgraded it to a flagrant 1. Unnecessary, excessive, and executed completely away from the ball. When reporters asked Carter about it after the game, she gave them 4 words. "I ain't answering that." Those 4 words detonated across every sports outlet within the hour. Not addressing what she'd done in a moment that had already gone fully national, told league executives exactly what kind of player Carter was going to be in any room involving sponsors, broadcast partners, or league representatives. She then spent the next several days amplifying the damage on social media, liking posts claiming Clark had flopped, tweeting "What does she bring to the table?" and essentially announcing to every front office executive watching that she had no interest in managing her image at the precise moment when managing her image was the only thing that could have saved her career. And this wasn't a one-time lapse of judgment. Carter had been suspended by the Atlanta Dream in 2021 for what the franchise described as conduct detrimental to the team. Reports at the time indicated she had threatened to fight a teammate. She was traded to the Los Angeles Sparks, where she was benched for conduct issues and then waived before the 2023 WNBA season. She sat out the entire 2023 WNBA year. She came back to Chicago in 2024, played the best basketball of her professional life, led the Sky in scoring with 17.5 points per game, and still couldn't stay. The Sky declined to extend her a qualifying offer, and then, remarkably, not one of the other 12 WNBA teams made a move either. Carter averaged 17.5 points per game. She'd just been named MVP of China's Women's Basketball League in the offseason, averaging over 31 points per game. One of the most talented guards in women's basketball was a completely free agent, and not a single team in the league called. She eventually signed with a team in Mexico. The Chicago Sky general manager, in his statement about not bringing her back,
said her behavior had created locker room tension and raised concerns about the team's ability to attract free agents. He never mentioned Clark. He never mentioned the hip check. He didn't need to. Everyone understood what the file on Chennedy Carter looked like, and the league-wide decision not to engage with her in 2025 was as clear a message as any ban the league could have issued. Rumors suggest that league executives had informal conversations about Carter in ways that made teams reluctant to take the risk, though nothing of that nature was ever officially confirmed. Chennedy Carter was a player. Diamond DeShields was a player. What made Sheryl Swoopes' situation different and arguably more revealing was that Swoopes wasn't playing anymore. She was a Hall of Famer, four-time WNBA champion, the first ever player to sign a WNBA contract. She had spent years after her playing career building a second identity as a broadcast analyst, and that identity came with real institutional weight behind it. A Hall of Famer calling games carries the league's credibility with it. That credibility has to be protected. It started in February 2024, before Clark had played a single WNBA game. Swoopes appeared on a podcast and suggested that Clark had played a fifth year at Iowa due to COVID eligibility, using that framing to question whether the all-time NCAA scoring record was legitimate. The actual facts were straightforward. Clark played 4 years at Iowa, just like any other standard college career. There was no extra year, there was no asterisk. The record was the record. When the mistake was pointed out publicly, Swoopes acknowledged the confusion, but had already put the narrative out there, and she kept going. Throughout the 2024 season, Swoopes found regular opportunities to minimize Clark's impact on air and in public appearances. When the Fever went on a run, and the story was obviously about what Clark had built there, Swoopes offered analysis that listed the team's key contributors and left Clark's name entirely off the list. Kelsey Mitchell, Lexi Hull, Aaliyah Boston, in coverage so obviously incomplete that it became its own story. Stephen A. Smith called her out on national television. Nancy Lieberman fact-checked her statements publicly, then called Swoopes privately to tell her that whatever opinions she wanted to hold were hers to hold, but the statistics had to be accurate. That phone call ended their friendship. Lieberman later said publicly that their relationship was simply no longer happening.
Then came the night of August 30th, the same night DeShields put Clark on the floor. Swoopes posted a message on social media in support of DeShields, appearing to encourage the behavior that had just prompted the league to upgrade a foul. 2 days later, the Fever visited Dallas. Swoopes was scheduled to call the game as a commentator for the Wings broadcast. She didn't call it. The Wings and Bally Sports Southwest put Nancy Lieberman in the booth instead. The official explanation was that Swoopes had already fulfilled her 7-game contract for the season. But Lieberman confirmed on the Stephen A. Smith show that she had received a phone call asking if she'd step in, and Smith was explicit in saying that the swap had everything to do with Swoopes' ongoing conduct around Clark. The WNBA didn't issue a statement. The Wings didn't hold a press conference. Swoopes was just quietly absent from the Fever broadcast, and then gradually absent from WNBA-affiliated broadcasts more broadly. A Hall of Fame career in the broadcast booth, years of building that second identity, dissolved because she couldn't separate a personal grievance from the professional obligation to cover a player that the entire league had staked its financial future on. 3 careers, 3 collapses, all inside the same window. All connected to the same player. Not one official acknowledgement from the league that any of them were related. Just quiet removals that sent a message to every player, every analyst, and every commentator watching. Here is what that message was actually built on, because understanding the economics makes every one of these decisions make complete sense, even if the way they played out makes you uncomfortable. When Caitlin Clark entered the WNBA in 2024, the league was already trending upward. Viewership had grown 21% the year before. Attendance had hit a 13-year high. There was momentum. And then Clark arrived, and the word momentum became completely inadequate to describe what happened next. The 2024 WNBA draft drew 2.45 million viewers, more than 4 times the previous record, set back in 2004. The All-Star Game drew 3.4 million viewers, a 305% increase from the year before. The entire regular season attracted over 54 million unique viewers across ABC, CBS, ESPN, ESPN2, ION, and NBA TV, the most watched regular season in 24 years. 22 regular season games cracked 1 million viewers. Clark was involved in 19 of them. On the ground level, the Indiana Fever had averaged roughly 4,000 fans per home game in 2023, when they were one of the worst teams in the league. In 2024, they averaged over 17,000. They set an all-time WNBA single-game attendance record, 20,711 fans, for a regular season game. The Fever were so popular on the road that the Sparks, the Aces, the Mystics, and the Dream all moved their home games against Indiana to larger NBA arenas just to fit the demand. WNBA merchandise sales were up 236% year over year. Sports betting on WNBA games was up over 150% at major platforms. Ryan Brewer, a finance professor at Indiana University Columbus, who was asked to formally evaluate Clark's economic impact, calculated that she was responsible for 26.5% of all WNBA economic activity in 2024. His analysis suggested her potential impact in a second year could approach $1 billion in total value to the league. On the court, Caitlin Clark set the WNBA single-season assists record with 337 in a single year, a record that had stood for years. She was the first rookie in league history to record a triple-double. She finished in the top 5 of MVP voting while winning Rookie of the Year unanimously. And all of this was sitting right in front of the league executives who were staring at the video of DeShields, reading the tweets from Carter, and watching Swoopes go silent in a broadcast booth rather than credit the player responsible for those numbers. There is one more piece of context that ties everything together, and it's the one that almost nobody was covering clearly in the middle of all the controversy: the 2026 Collective Bargaining Agreement. Players in the WNBA are among the lowest-paid professional athletes in American sports. Caitlin Clark's rookie salary was $76,535, a number that is genuinely difficult to say out loud without some awkwardness, given what she was generating for the league. The player union had been fighting for a better deal for years, and in October 2024, they exercised their right to opt out of the existing CBA, putting everything on the table for renegotiation ahead of a new deal in 2026. Player salaries, revenue sharing, benefits, the entire financial relationship between the league and the people who actually play in it.
The only argument that gets players a better deal is a league that can walk into a room with broadcast networks, sponsors, and potential investors and prove that it generates real, growing, sustainable revenue. Clark is that proof. She's the live data the league brings into every negotiation room to justify higher numbers for everyone, including the veterans who have been grinding in the league for years before anyone outside the hardcore fan base was paying attention. And here's where it lands. DeShields, Carter, and Swoopes weren't just creating bad optics. They were actively threatening the leverage the entire league needs to negotiate a better financial future for every player who will ever suit up in the WNBA. When you're sitting across the table from a broadcast network trying to justify a 9-figure rights deal, the last thing you can afford is a highlight reel of your players targeting the one person who moved every metric you're presenting. The league's decision to distance itself from all three wasn't personal. It was the clearest possible business calculation. And in retrospect, now that the numbers from the 2024 season are fully documented and the scale of what Clark has built for that league is undeniable, it was also correct. DeShields blamed Clark for where her career ended up. The record on that is worth examining clearly. DeShields had talent, she had experience, she had a championship ring and an all-star game on her resume. What she ran into was a league that had finally found something it had been chasing for 25 years, a player who could move mainstream attention without being manufactured or promoted into relevance, a player who made casual sports viewers care, A player who made casual sports viewers become season ticket holders, jersey buyers, and people who had never watched a single WNBA game suddenly show up 4 hours early to standing room-only arenas. When you have that, you protect it, not as a personal favor, not as the league playing favorites, but because you have finally found the thing that pays everyone's salary, and you simply cannot afford to have that thing undermined from inside your own league while you're in the middle of negotiating the most important media deal in your organization's history. The players who couldn't adapt to that reality are watching from the outside now. And across the board, the players who understood what Clark's presence meant, who recognized that a rising tide was the only tide worth being part of, built something alongside it. The Fever's core around Clark played team basketball that sold because Clark made the audience care enough to watch in the first place. The league's quiet cleaning of the house sends one very clear message forward. The era of targeting the player lifting every boat in the water is over. Not because the WNBA wrote a rule, because the market enforced it faster and more completely than any rule ever could have. And that enforcement wasn't going to stop until everyone understood exactly what was at stake. Here is where things stand right now, because this story is not finished. The 2026 CBA negotiations are heating up. Clark's own contract situation, where a player generating an estimated 26.5% of all league economic activity earns less than what many WNBA players make in a month, is going to force every conversation the league has been quietly avoiding about player value and revenue sharing out into the open. The expansion franchises coming into the league are bringing new money and new pressure to figure out what the right financial structure looks like. And the generation of players coming up behind Clark, Paige Bookers, Juju Watkins, Kiki Rice, means the question of how the league handles its superstars is not a one-time problem. It's a structural question that has to get answered right. The players who paid the price this season found out the hard way that the invisible rules in a small market can end careers without a single official statement ever being issued. The ones who are still playing found out the same thing from the other side, that when the league has something worth protecting, it will protect it, quietly, efficiently, and with exactly the finality that 3 waiver notices in 12 months communicates to anyone paying attention. Drop your read on this in the comments right now. Do you think the league handled this the right way, or did the quiet enforcement go further than it should have? And if you want to be there when the CBA negotiations start forcing all of these conversations into the open, subscribe and hit the notification bell. That next chapter is coming faster than most people realize.